Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. My next Bob's pick for tonight also stars the actor who played the lead in our last film, Saboteur, and that's Robert Cummings, who this time secured the impressive role he plays because Warner Brothers couldn't get the star they really wanted for it, and that was Tyrone Power. Our film is King's Row, made in 1941, released in 1942, and they couldn't get Tyrone Power because he was too valuable at that time to his home studio of 20th Century Fox for them to loan him out to the competition. Also, Fox wasn't happy with the way he was used, and the one time they did loan him out to do something, and that was in Indians Marie Antoinette. So the starring role in King's Row went to Robert Cummings. The film is based on what was a very steamy bestseller about the lives and loves of several people in a small fictional Midwestern town called King's Row, all about the kind of things not allowed to be talked about in a movie in those days, such as incest and premarital sex. But the movie was made and stays amazingly true to the novel. You just have to, in essence, read between the lines now and then. This is the movie that contains perhaps the best performances ever given by either Ronald Reagan or Ann Sheridan, the movie's famous oomph girl. Both of them had to fight, though, to be cast in it. The studio bosses didn't think Ann Sheridan was right to play a decidedly unglamorous, small-town girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Ann Sheridan was Warner Brothers' #1 glamour girl at that time, but she eventually did get the part. She is great in it. She doesn't have a false, untruthful moment in the whole film. For Ronald Reagan, it's the best part he was ever given to play in the movie, a part that gave him a line that's forever after been associated with as the title of his 1965 autobiography. The cast of our movie is chock full of really great people. Betty Field's in it, Claude Rains, Charles Coburn, Judith Anderson, and the always formidable Madame Maria Uspinskaya. Here directed by Sam Wood, the story of a town called King's Row.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie, the podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margo P of coloniabook.com, and we have a very special guest. This is, I don't think we've ever done a two-parter. This episode and the next episode are very closely related to each other, and our guest is probably the only person on the planet who can tell us why and how. I'd like to introduce Lenny Pinna from Ecclesia Arts.
Hi, thanks for having me, Margo. It's really great. Yes, back in February of 2000, I had made a film about a 75-year-old actor in Cleveland. And during that filming, he introduced me to the knowing about King's Row, because he had just taped it. After all these years, he said he had waited for it on Turner Classics. And then he says it's based on a novel by Henry Bellamy. And then he says he wrote to Henry Bellamy, and the author wrote back, and that they had an exchange of letters. And all of this private information came out in one evening, and that became my introduction to even knowing about King's Row or Henry Bellamy. And so my film, Letters to Uranus, is about Henry and Ted's writing to each other that he tells us about in the shape of his whole life. Then I actually read their correspondence and said, someday I want to make a film or TV series about that particular time between 1943 and 1945. So both of my films, my film and TV series, are absolutely integrated with King's Row.
And next time, so the next episode is going to be about your book, A Face from Uranus, your film that you did with Ted that you just referenced, Letters to Uranus, and also the series that you have created called In the Name of Jamie Wakefield. And if you've ever only seen the film of King's Row and you've never read the book, then you may not know who Jamie Wakefield is. But let's get into, before we get to that, let's talk about Henry Bellamy. He's a very interesting figure, and there's really not that much available on the internet in terms of learning about his background. So we're going to rely on you here to really tell us about who this man was, and what, what King's Row did for him and maybe did not do for him. And so tell us about Henry Bellman.
Well, I have to give credit to Professor Harry Bain from Spartanburg Methodist College. He had tried to contact me when he heard about my film, and 10 years earlier, because he saw a few letters from Ted in the archives at the University of Mississippi archives. So I ended up contacting him saying, I need information on Henry Bellman. And we had an amazing connection and talked about it. And he gave me a lot of information that solved a lot of my questions that I had by reading the letters. And then he went on and gave me more and more information. So I did get a lot from Harry Bain. So I'm telling you where a lot of that came from. Because he did his dissertation on the life and works of Henry Bellman. And unfortunately, there isn't a copy of that. He had to send me his only copy for me to read his dissertation. Oh, it's amazing that I'm getting this information. So I want to say that early on, Henry Bellman was of German descent. He had a questionable birth. People thought that he was born out of wedlock. And his mother had an affair with somebody that came to town before she married. I think his name was George Bellman. And so he was treated in this town basically like an outcast, a little bit ostracized. And he was actually raised by his grandmother. So his mother's mother raised him, and they really lived on the outskirts of town. And if you've read King's Row or seen King's Row, there's a real strata of society, from those that are doctors and lawyers down to the people who are living, close to the water's edge or Jinktown or different places that are questionable, across the tracks kind of thing. Well, Henry Bellman actually was that figure. He definitely was one of the more outsiders. So he was very bright, very talented at piano, and his grandmother definitely helped him get to a college where he was able to study piano. He became a teacher, and he sort of dotted his way from Missouri, across the South a little bit, getting a teaching job. And then he eventually met at one of the teaching jobs, his wife, Catherine, at Tuscaloosa College for Girls. They got married, and then they both got jobs teaching. He taught piano, she taught voice, and they got the job at Chicora College. I'm getting all these colleges. Chicora College together. From there, he just kept growing in his field until he eventually became Dean of Curtis Music in Philadelphia. He was on the Juilliard board of music, but he became a writer around this time. He started actually when he was in Chicora College. He started writing music reviews, and then he started writing poetry, and then he started writing actually some literary reviews. And so he was building up his sort of muscle, and then he started writing novels. And then 1940, he had already written 3 novels that didn't do too much, but King's Row became a smashing success, put him on the map.
And he's born. Oh, I was going to show a picture of young Henry Bellman. Here we go. Not bad looking.
No, he was. And everyone talked about how kind of precise and poised he was. He had this formality about him. And that actually shows in the character of Paris in King's Row, which is modeled on him.
So the novel is set at the end of the 19th century, which is when he himself was growing up, and it's Fulton, right? Is that the name of the town you said?
Fulton, Missouri. Yes.
And the book, I was telling you when we spoke before, like when I was reading this book, for those of you longtime listeners, this is a book that was on our list to cover for a very long time. We first heard about it. There's a great I've mentioned this here before, but there's a great YouTube channel called Tired Old Queen at the Movies. This man named Steve Hayes. He's so funny. And he did an episode on King's Row, and I had never even heard of King's Row. And I remember that Reagan's book was called Where's the Rest of Me?
Yes.
But I didn't know why. And so that was where we first heard about it and kind of had it on the back burner. But it is not a short book. I mean, my copy here, I have a first edition copy, and it is 674 pages long.
Yes. Yes.
But I will say it's a quick read. It's a real page turner.
Yep.
And it reminded me, this is from what year? I'm sorry. This is 1940.
Yeah. Yes. 1940 it was published.
And I really feel, I mentioned this book at the end of our last episode that we did with Kristen Meinzer, and one of our favorite books that we covered, and we covered it more than once on the show, was Valley of the Dolls. And I love me some Valley of the Dolls. And when we covered Peyton Place, we were like, oh, Peyton Place walked so Valley of the Dolls could fly. But then when I read King's Row, I realized, no, King's Row walked.
Yes.
So that Peyton Place could run, so that Valley of the Dolls could fly. And having read Peyton Place, there's an awful lot of similarity. I have to think there are a lot of devices that were kind of inspired by King's Row. In particular, one of the thing that kind of just really caught my attention was when Henry Bellamy describes the town, like what it looks like, and how it's laid out. And there's this church on this end and that church on that end. And there's a very, very similar passage to that in Peyton Place, where she describes Peyton Place in almost exactly the same way.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And very similar, like, and I should say trigger warning, because there's a lot of themes in this book that did not make it into the film. And there's a lot of violence that happens, just apart from things like homosexuality that they just were not going to show in a movie in those days. But there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of sexual violence that happens. And also in a very similar way to Peyton Place. It's very similar. Not identical, but there's a lot of moments where I was like, I kind of remember this from Peyton Place. So I think, I was surprised by his writing. When I went to look up Henry Bellamy, what I found, his writing isn't that easy to find these days, except for King's Row. But I did find some pieces of his poetry that had been put to music, people that he must have collaborated with as part of his musical career. And so I was kind of surprised by the writing as compared to the poetry. But I think he does a beautiful job he really goes to a lot of detail describing every single visual, the smells, the sounds, the way the light plays on this or that. And then similarly, each character you're given such a full description of everybody is very three-dimensional. But we begin when these people, does it begin in the classroom after, right? I love that choice. It's not in the film at all. No, a lot of these people are not in the film, but I love that the book begins. And that I was really intrigued. We start on a very hot day, and it's obviously no air conditioning. It's the end of the 19th century. And we have this teacher, Miss Venable. Is that her name?
Sally Venable.
Sally Venable. And Sally Venable is over it. Like, it's been a long year. It's a hot day. She's ready to be done with these kids. And she's kind of like listlessly looking around her classroom and like, there's another bunch of kids from King's Row. Here we go. And she kind of looks from one to another, and she lands on a character named Jamie Wakefield. So tell us about Jamie Wakefield.
Well, you have just described the moment in my film about the elder Ted Burr this was my first introduction to King's Row, the novel, on film. He questioned, what was it that made me write to this author, this famous author, when I was just a little, he was 19 years old. He goes, what made this little kid from a little town do it? And he goes right to like page 4, and Ted was an actor, and he did it with such, beauty. But the passage is actually started the whole thing for me. She said, she goes, Jamie Wakefield, too pretty to be a boy. She talks about how he's dressed in ruffles, and she talks about the little girlish expressions, the little pouts on his face as she's watching him read. And then she ends this description by saying, why, he's as beautiful as Cassandra Tower, which is the other little girl in class who everyone knows, and then of course it becomes the love interest, strange love interest of Paris in King's Row. So Jamie Wakefield is actually the first character she describes, and Jamie Wakefield was the character that was not in the film because of the Hays Code in 1940s. And here, Ted Burr, I just have to tie it together. He watched King's Row many times because he was an usher at the movie theater in Bellevue, Ohio. He liked it so much he went to read the novel, and there he reads about Jamie Wakefield. So he writes to Henry because of the character that was not in the film, and because he so identified with it. And I just find it so fascinating that the one that was left out actually has become a very important figure for me and in my work.
But also, he's a very pivotal character in the book.
Absolutely, because two things about this novel. Psychology is a big deal. They have an insane asylum on one end of town.
That's not in the movie at all.
No. And it's so interesting because Henry Bellarmine and his wife Catherine would have salons in South Carolina for psychologists to present their papers on psychology. They were now part of what was called the Babcock Society that was promoting Freudian psychology in America. Well, here his main protagonist in King's Row is a young boy who grows up to become a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and it's the new field, the emerging field of studying the mind. And it's so interesting because that is, I think, is what gives King's Row this ability to span an entire century, because he looks back at the very late 1800s, but he's looking at it from the 40s from a psychological point of view that is already informing our futures that we know about as modern psychology. And so we're getting modern psychology addressing a period when it was hardly known. And I think that's why the King's Row, for me, I have to say, I reread it, or I'm almost done it again for this podcast. I'm more amazed now how resonant it is with what people still feel, or especially in many of the towns in our country. There still is this same vein of thinking that is in this book. And this is over 100, and we're talking now 120 years ago, 125 years ago. So I actually think King's Row is becoming more relevant because, like any good piece of work, when it holds up from a period, a mirror to society, and that you can see yourself in your time by really looking there, because sometimes you don't want to see it in your own period. You can really see it in another period. I think it has more to say now than ever.
I totally agree. I was really struck by not just, having characters like a Jamie Wakefield in a novel, a novel, first of all, from basically the 1930s.
Right.
But set in the 1890s. And so that already is very unusual. But not just that, but yes, as you say, like, it really is introducing the idea of psychiatry and psychology. And there's also just the great American themes. There's racism, there's classism, there's tribalism, there's the puritanical repression that happens, and then it comes out in all these ugly, awful ways. And before we go on with the novel, I would like you to talk a little bit about speaking, you started to talk about it, but to get back a little bit to help us understand, first of all, this was a very successful novel, very, very, very successful.
It saved Simon and Schuster. They were near bankruptcy.
So unsurprisingly, they wanted a sequel.
Yes.
Right?
They did, especially after the film did so well.
So I'd like you to talk a little bit about Henry and his wife, Catherine. And I went and looked up in your book, in the letter, one of the things that I thought was, and we'll talk about this more next time, but one of the things that I thought was very strange about the whole correspondence of Henry and Ted, Henry's living in the Ansonia Hotel and in New York. Ted's in this little town, Bellevue, Ohio, and for most of it, he moves a little bit later. But Henry, and they're talking about very personal things, extremely personal things, and Henry mentions his wife twice, maybe. And so he has this way far into their correspondence. I've looked up the passage because I had to see what he said. This is what he said about the person who was literally like maybe in the next room every time he's writing a letter, right?
Right.
So he says, I have a wife. Doesn't give us her name. It's just, I have a wife who wrote once a particularly amusing book called My Husband's Friends, a book that nearly ruined my reputation. It is the story of a scientist's husband and his love affairs. It was purely fiction. And then he moves on. Doesn't talk about her like ever again.
No. And the extreme irony, you read my book, they talk about opera singers, opera performances, Broadway singers, music, art. His wife, Catherine Bellarmine, was a voice teacher for Broadway and opera singers. She was in that field. And he never even mentions that, I've learned about this through my wife's association with, Melchior or whatever. I mean, like, he never mentions her whole career that she has with him. I mean, on the side of him. And it's fascinating. But that's part of why I told my story of Ted and Henry, is because he was vicariously. He was wanting Ted to not know he had a wife. That's what I think, is because he had this, I want you to look at me as your teacher, your mentor, your possibly would-be lover. Like in every shade of relationship, he kept wanting him, look at me as that. I'm almost a contemporary of yours. I might be older than you, but I'm very contemporary. He did not want to tell him. He only mentioned that he had a wife when Ted asked him. He said, I've told you so much about me and I know very little about you. And that's when he gets that letter saying, I have a wife, and doesn't even name her.
And Ted shares about his parents and his sister, his nephew, and all observations about his family. And we'll talk about that next time. But the other thing that I found was really weird was that it didn't occur to me, and the first time I read it, I did notice, like, I'm sure she has a name. Your wife must have a name. But he does, and he mentions this book that his wife has written. He doesn't tell Ted the name of his wife, but he does tell Ted the name of the book.
I know.
Which I happen to have right here.
Me too. I love it. Yeah, I know. It's fascinating. So, I think I was going to make a point earlier about what Jamie Wakefield was also very important to in King's Row is Henry. I'm going to say this in modern terms. I would say Henry is probably bisexual, because through his growing up, Paris's growing up, he's constantly male. That's not quite male. That's a little bit female. That's male. That's female. That's male. That's female. That's an attraction to a woman. That's attraction to a guy. He uses Jamie as a gauge with Drake McHugh, played by Ronald Reagan, as I could talk to Jamie about this, but I can't talk to Drake about that. But I can associate with Drake about this, but I seemingly might not want to be associated with Jamie about that. And he's always talking about his feelings of, I feel attracted to Jamie almost. Drake, I'm almost attracted to. I'm almost attracted to Cass. I mean, I'm very attracted to Cassie. I'm very attracted to Renee. He's mulling over his attractions and the whys and what is it about them that he can tell Drake, but he can't tell, or what he can tell Jamie about that can't tell Drake. So I want to say he's really dissecting maleness in King's Row. And isn't that something that we need in our society today? Is the nuances of maleness. The interesting thing is, and Professor Rachel Price, who has written the introduction to the reprint, this is the reprint of King's Row, she discusses that, you know, at that time, you know, homosexuality or somebody that was pretty like a boy who possibly, as a matter of fact, Drake even said, you know, if Jamie were a woman, what he would like to do. I mean, so they were looking at Jamie like, you're in between, and I don't know whether you're male or female. Those characters, according to the town, of course, were looked at, you know, side-eyed and talked about or gossiped about. Paris, he does not talk about them that way. He might question something, but he has a compassion, he has a care, he has an attraction too that he's questioning. So it's really interesting that I think he's doing some really subtle work about gender and sexuality back in the 1940s through a psychological perspective that I think we still continue to need today.
And thinking about, I know I hate to keep talking about the what we're going to talk about next time, but I feel like we have to kind of keep dragging it in a little bit.
It is interwoven now, yes.
But thinking about, you know, you talked about that moment when Ted, just because he enjoyed the film so much, he goes and gets the book and he connects with that character of Jamie Wakefield. And one of the things, as you say, that's I really did not expect is that Paris. So there's a point where Jamie, does he kiss Paris? I can't remember. He kisses Paris. And then there's also like a moment with Drake that happens, right?
That one happens. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The one with Drake happens in the carriage.
Yeah.
Carriage ride. The one with Paris happens when they're sort of in their high school years. They're walking at night and they go to this sort of park and they're on a bench and Jamie kisses him. Yes.
And rather than either Paris, who is very cerebral, you know, he wants to be a doctor. Drake is very carefree, very kind of big man on campus kind of a guy. He's rich. He's an orphan, but he's set up for life. Yeah. And although these two kind of different pictures of maleness, these two characters representing these two kinds of maleness, have these encounters with Jamie, at no point are they repulsed by him. They're just they're super respectful. Like, wow, I don't, you know, I understand, but I don't think, I'm not sure how I feel about that. And both of them continue to be friends with Jamie through the rest of the story.
Yes. Yes.
For years and years into adulthood.
Yes. And in real life, Henry Bellamy tells Ted, so I can say this, that Jamie Wakefield was based on a childhood friend of his. Harry Bain, the professor, let me know who that childhood friend was, Albert Berghauser. And then he informed me that when Henry and Catherine married, within their first year of marriage, very soon within their first year of marriage, out of nowhere, Albert Berghauser comes to their home. Henry gets him a job teaching piano, which he isn't even qualified for, at Chicora College, because Henry is now department chair and Catherine's teaching voice. And they lived together, all three, in campus housing for 5 years together until Catherine says, I can't go on with this. Look, I only married one of you. The other one has to go. So that childhood friend, Albert Berghauser, who was very pretty, like a pretty boy, that he based Jamie Wakefield on, ends up actually being in his early married life and putting the pieces together, as you Did you read My Husband's Friends yet?
I am about halfway through. I plan to have it finished by the time
Yes.
we get to talking
Okay,
about
good.
Ted. But
If
please
you did,
talk about it because it is relevant here.
I can tie because I know you already read this. Because the first affair, My Husband's Friends, his affairs, his first seemingly heart affair, we'll put it that way, was with Victor Sayer, a childhood friend that came and lived with this scientist and his wife for 5 years until she found a way to get him out of the house.
Yes, I got that part. I got past that, which is terribly clever.
So we're talking about they are writing autobiographies here. You know,
yes, in spite of his protestation that it's purely fictional.
As they say, thou dost protest too much.
But one of the things that, and her writing, and we'll get to her writing because she is actually the one that completes the long-awaited sequel to King's Row.
Yes.
But her writing style, and I can't say it's bad, it's just totally different. It's completely different than his.
Absolutely.
I just want to read her description of Victor Sayer, the interloper.
Yes,
on the marriage, which I love this.
Please
she says, Victor Sayer, his gay chatter was like an impalpable dust, a fine sift of inimical dust, a drying, obstructing, sterilizing, killing dust. It's like, tell us how you really feel.
Exactly. Oh my. So, you know, I want to maybe seg just a little bit to, because when we're comparing, in this case, book to film,
right?
Warner Brothers film obviously left out a lot of the parts that had to be censored out, like homosexuality or the incest that goes on.
Yes.
They attribute that to she's maybe psychologically going off. So
maybe she's a nymphomaniac.
Yes, but her father, you know, kills her because she has this impending craziness coming on. Well, okay, so that's how they handled it in the 40s, you know. And when I look at the film, you know, yeah, somehow at least paved the way a little bit by attacking some of those or confronting some of those subjects.
Mm-hmm.
But what I want to say is, having written the TV series that I've written, because I actually feel it's sort of like the sequel to King's Row in some way, thematically, I actually truly feel that King's Row should not only be a new version, be done. I think it should be an episodic limited series.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can't do, these people grow over time. These are generations. You can't do that in a film, but in a limited TV series. And the interesting thing is, now the story of Jamie, the story of the incest, the story of the doctor, those kinds of things can now be portrayed and actually would be quite, you know, provocative even for today's audience. In TV series, I think, this is my hope, I'm hoping my TV series gets out there. It's on YouTube as a proposed TV series. I hope it'll get produced. I actually think that could pave the way for somebody to say, we need to do King's Row now in that same manner. And so I think it needs to be redone as a film. I mean, as a film project, but I really think it's a TV series.
I agree. It's just, one of the nice things, it is a very long book, but it needs to be, because we see these people grow from childhood, and we see this town evolve into the 20th century. And I think at a time like that, where we have things like AI, you know, our world is changing very rapidly, just like theirs was. And yeah, you would lose, I would hate to lose, every person's story is very, I can't say there's like a lot of extra people or a lot of extra story going on here.
So what's really interesting is Henry once said, and I think I got this through Harry Bain. He said that King's Row is written like a musical fugue, which brings these elements, motifs They keep coming back. They keep interweaving and interweaving and interweaving. So it's a kind of story that's actually a fabric. It's not one of those linear chronological stories. It's one that has inner reflection and external. And I really think that we have the skills and the techniques and the sensibility to visually bring to life that which could not have been done in the 40s, not just in terms of theme, but in terms of the intricacies of how the story works. And to me, it's a really, and I'm going to say it now, a quintessential American story. It takes place in Fulton, Missouri, which is the heart of the country. It is one of those between places. It's between everything. And he writes King's Row almost from that between perspective. And honestly, again, I'm going to get back to our society now. We need a between perspective that looks at a full story of a community, of a town, of how it evolves. And I really have gotten in touch with the irony. The opening scene, both in the film and in the book, says, well, they just say it in the book, but in the film they put it on a billboard. King's Row, a good clean place to raise your children. And the interesting thing is, if you think about it, that those kids that are introduced in the schoolroom, they are all pressed upon by or abused in some way, psychological. Drake, the banker stole his fortune. The father kills the daughter. These kids, we're growing up in a safe environment. The ones that were actually harming them were the parents and the community. And that's the story that I think needs to be told today, because you know what? Someone reminded me recently, I was telling him about what we were talking about, and he reminded me of South Pacific and saying, you have to be taught. You have to be taught very well how to hate. You have to be taught very well how to hate.
And I was going to say, this book shows like all the different ways, all the different levels that they're teaching this generation that we're watching grow up.
Yes. Racism, sexism, we're watching it all being ingrained into the children. And we have the children, Paris, of course, the main protagonist, questioning all of this, questioning it. And we need this perspective, again, where we look at the whole of society and what are we really teaching our children from birth to recreate the same patterns and prejudices and problems. I think that this still holds up a mirror to society in a way that we could really see it again.
I totally agree. Before we talk about the movie and show the trailer and all of that, let's just talk about some of the people besides Jamie Wakefield that are not in the film. So there is the boy who
Benny Singer.
Yes, thank you. That's his name, Benny Singer. So tell us about him.
He's kind of what we, like slow-minded sort of kid. So sweet. Just looks at the world with sweetness and everybody like, oh, they're talking to me. He doesn't even know that they're taunting him sometimes with insults. He just thinks, oh, they're talking to me. Someone's talking to me. But he has a slowness of intellect. Well, they basically bully him like we see where they bully people, the special needs sort of children, until he is so provoked years later. I mean, they're doing it and doing it and doing it until they throw rocks at his mother's in the house. He ends up, an inner rage comes out, and he ends up killing two of those bullies. And what happens? The town hangs him for they did all the provocation for years and years and years. That is one of the saddest moments for me in this book. I can almost cry.
It's terribly sad.
So this is what we're teaching, in this community, that they're teaching how to and let them get away with the bullying.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. There's also then the ambitious, greedy ones,
Yes.
like the Fulmer Green, I think is his name.
Yeah.
And how, how they're trying to, get people to buy things. And I mean, it's a fascinating microscopic cosmology of the larger picture of our country.
There's also, that's not in the film, they kind of mash the one story into the other story, that Paris has a childhood sweetheart named Renee.
Yes.
Before he's involved with Cass, he's friends with Cassie when they're children, but his sweetheart is really Renee. And this, like, I mean, I get it why it's not in the movie, but basically they're sweethearts. I mean, they're innocent kids, and they go swimming, and gradually they realize that they're in love with each other, and they have sex after, spending the day together, and maybe somebody sees them. And the next thing we know, she and her and he goes to the house to, like, because he's worried about her, and he hears a terrible fight going on that her father is beating her. And then the next day they're gone.
They totally uproot.
Yeah. Totally
pull her and their whole family away from it. Yeah. No way to navigate or deal with and the sad part once again is the natural beauty of how they started as innocent kids with a beautiful friendship that just kept evolving. And I have to say, the moment they have, you wish that more people would have their first experience like that. That it's filled with respect and beauty and connected to nature and feels like it's beyond them. And
he writes it so beautifully,
yes,
and it's really well written.
And in a way, it's one of the Garden of Eden stories. They're almost like in their own little the secret lake, the little Garden of Eden. And sure enough, it's somebody's interpretation of that destroys it. Not only destroys the moment, but destroys their relationship. They are psychologically damaged because of what basically they're saying. You're evil. You're evil. That's that society, the puritanical society that we're talking about. That and it's the same thing. And if you see my film about the elder Ted, near the end of the film, he talks about he and a little girl, and his imposing Aunt Lena sees them in the garden and says, "You evil little children." It's almost identical. It's so interesting that Ted and Henry have connected because they have similar feelings about things like that.
And then we get most of the story about the Gordons. There's two town doctors. There's Dr. Gordon and Dr. Towers, and they both have their families, each of them. Dr. Gordon's story is mostly in the movie. That almost all of that has made it into the movie.
Yes.
Dr. Tower, it's very different. So Dr. Tower, we established, is sort of the more respected doctor, I would say. Like, he's the more knowledgeable doctor. He doesn't see people as much as Dr. Gordon. Dr. Gordon's the one who comes to your house and delivers the baby and all that.
Yes.
Dr. Tower's like, something is really, really, really wrong. We're going to have to consult Dr. Tower. And Paris, again, he's an orphan being raised by his grandmother. His grandmother's whole prime directive of life is to make sure that her grandson becomes a doctor and goes to Europe to study. And to help him prepare for his exams and all of that, she decides that he needs to study with Dr. Towers. So she sends him to Dr. Towers' house. Now, Cassandra, pretty Cassie, was pulled out of school when she was very little, and nobody has seen her for years and years. And Dr. Tower also has a wife who almost nobody sees, and she is upstairs, and every now and again somebody gets a glimpse of her in the window.
Sitting in the window.
And we don't really know what's up with her. And then one day she's just dead. And so now the grown-up Paris is going there to study, and Cassandra was his childhood friend, and so naturally, and he's a very polite, gracious kind of a person. And so anytime he, even in the most innocent way, is asking after, please tell your daughter I said hello, he always gets this like really chilly response. But he's studying very seriously with Dr. Tower and respects him. And and eventually he has this opportunity to be alone with Cassie. And this is sort of in the film. They get as close as they can get.
Yes, they
right?
do. Yeah, they
And
do.
they do. And then eventually, but the circumstances of Cassie's death and her father's death totally different. So let's spoil that for everybody, because
Yeah.
if you've seen the movie, it's not like this at all. It's not at all like this.
No. Yeah, so, this, as you said, this young girl first, has been sequestered for years and years. Her approach is their sexuality that comes together is unlike his with Renee, which blossomed over time and had this beauty. Theirs had this, probably the urgency of taboo in a way, because they were so removed from each other, and they were both sort of pent up in a way. But it definitely still was a very, normal sexual connection in a certain way. But what we didn't know until we find out that really her father, this respected psychiatrist, has been molesting her and keeping her to himself, really. That's kind of what it is. And so, no, they didn't show that. What they did was they did the thing of Freudian psychology. Oh my God, she had sex with him. She's hysterical. She's now hysterical. And so the reason her father probably killed him as a psychiatrist was he thought she was now going crazy, and he wanted to spare her that, as if maybe the mother, we assume that the mother in some way is probably crazy.
That's the implication.
And that Cassie could become like her. So
better to end her life.
Better to end her now. I mean, I mean, that's what Hollywood did to justify that the father killed her. But that wasn't the story. The story was, it comes out in his notebooks that Paris eventually sees after he dies, that he's the one that has been sexually molesting her.
Yeah.
And boy, isn't that our story in our world right now? It's to find out how many parents are involved with the
this kind of abuse. Yeah.
Sexual abuse, whether directly or pass them on to people who do.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it really, is it like, I actually feel like King's Row in the last 25 years since I read it before is actually more important now, because it really is speaking to something, because we're actually going back to a lot of that cruelty, the bullying, the cover up for kids being abused. Like, we need to see this again.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the whole thing about, so just to put it in perspective, Paris, poor Paris's first romance. And we don't know if Renee is dead or alive, by the way. Like,
right.
She might not be alive. In any case, like, his first love is taken away from him. His second, really maybe going someplace relationship, is also taken away from him in a violent way.
Yep.
By the father of the young woman. Like, how is this guy ever going to have a healthy relationship ever again? I don't know.
Both of his, both fathers did that to their daughters. Yes. Yeah.
There's also there's an allusion to the Peyton Graves, who was going to go into real estate with Drake. And then Drake, of course, loses all his money, and then Peyton goes into business for himself. But that's a whole storyline in the book as well. So Peyton marries this woman, and they are obsessed with class. And all the demonstrations of, conspicuous consumption, and it's a very hollow kind of existence. And then Peyton, carries on an affair with the new school teacher, who is Black, or at least half Black. She's the daughter, the illegitimate daughter of one of the town,
one of the respectable white men.
So there's that whole element, which doesn't really come into play at all in the movie.
No, that's what I mean, is there's so much richness to be mined in all of these relations, and it's both individual characters and it's societal, because this whole thing about the economics we're a small town that wants to grow, and how do you grow? And we look here, and it has to do almost with that expansionism, you know, of some people made it to Missouri, but they really were on their way to the west.
Yeah, they were going someplace else. Yeah.
But they got stopped in Missouri, kind of thing. But there's still this other people that are sort of like itching to maybe still progress, you know, and expand. And it all has to do with the economics of the people who have the money and who don't. I mean, it's really, it really is so intricately woven of this fabric of this community, this society that speaks so much about what goes on in our world.
And then the last thing I want to bring up that's not in the film before we watch the trailer is the asylum. The asylum is this presence that's there from the very beginning. And that is where Paris ends up, you know, that's where he ends up making his career.
Yes.
But it's constantly kind of looming there in the background. Dr. Gordon threatens his daughter that he's going to send her to the asylum if she talks. And he says that in the film, but it's not this character the whole time like it is in the book.
It's a character. I went to Fulton, Missouri.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
I went to Fulton, Missouri to get in touch with all of this, and I saw it's a new building. It is a prominent end of the town that this insane asylum. It definitely had a foreboding, looming presence, and it was almost like this reminder. It's almost like hell, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't watch out, you'll end up in the asylum.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, it was like this will keep you all in place, you know.
So that element is not really there.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And there's also more stuff about churches and their role.
Oh,
these institutions.
The Catholics. Yeah, it's all. Yeah, exactly. No, they couldn't tell. First of all, they couldn't have told it all
certainly not
in a 2-hour film. No. But they definitely couldn't have told the intricacies of what's going on. That's why it really needs breadth. It needs to be a series. They did make it into a series. Now I never saw it, but they made it 9.
I saw that they did. Yeah.
In the 50s, there were 9 episodes that they say that I think they knew. I think they after the film, I think they knew that it could become an episodic series. It didn't. For whatever reason, it petered out. But I think
it's not the right time.
Yes, I think now's the time that this story could be told. And we're seeing a lot of period pieces now in these TV series because they can go back with the modern technology and psychology and really mine the richness of what was underneath there that you could never really tell until now. And I think King's Row is ripe for that as well.
It really helps us see all of the things, like you just mentioned, all of the roots of so many of the problems that we are still grappling with right now. So let's take a look at the trailer for the 1941 film. So this is just a year later, 1941, King's Row. Let's see here.
Did you read King's Row? I never read such a fascinating story.
When a boy who belongs uptown starts taking a girl from the lower end of town out buggy riding at night, people talk.
I'd marry you. That'd shut their traps.
I wouldn't marry you, Drake.
Are you frightened?
No.
We were going to run away. She'd been getting out to meet me for a long time. Do I need to say anything more?
Did Dr. Tower know anything about this?
I guess I wouldn't be here today if he had.
Don't. Even now, don't say anything you don't mean. I don't even know how I feel about you.
Dr. Tower, I'm going to ask you a question perhaps you won't like answering. Is Dr. Gordon a good doctor?
Not a very tactful question, young man. Not a very ethical one for a young doctor to ask.
Ever since I can remember, I've noticed things.
Drake finds out.
You'll never find out.
Yes, he will. She'll come again or someone else will. That kind of news always gets home. That would.
So for those folks who were just listening and not watching, there was a lot of text. It's a trailer with a lot of text, a lot of reading over the. Before we go any further, we have to talk about the score.
Yes.
Which might have sounded a little familiar to people.
Yes, it is. It is known that the film Star Wars, the composer definitely paid homage to King's Row by that dun 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 dun. It was from King's Row. He said that that's what he did. He used that. So, yeah. So interesting. This great American story about an 1800 is used in a future film about Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a
grandeur.
A score about that's supposed to evoke the past. Is set in this future, but it is it's not that future, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Remember?
Oh, right.
We're not quite sure where we are in time.
That's true. It felt like future, right? But it was a long time ago.
I think under the circumstances, it is an extraordinary thing. One of the things that struck me about the production of this film, because I had never seen it before. I say it was the first I heard about it was when I saw Steve Hayes talking about it. And I was surprised after reading the book that what I expected Hollywood to do was, okay, this is going to be a movie about Ronald Reagan, or this is going to be a movie about Bob Cummings. But what they've done is very much like the book does. It's a very much ensemble piece.
Yes.
It's every single little cast, every single character is very important. And although we do have these two main male characters, it's not just focused on them. It's not everybody's talking about one of these two guys. We are getting glimpses into all the various threads in this tapestry, as well as we can in a 2-hour movie.
I agree.
Our screenwriter is Casey Robinson, who I think is to be credited. I mean, having to work with the Hays Code and a almost 700-page book. It's not the easiest task. He's also the screenwriter for Now Voyager, so that should tell you a little something. Also starring Claude Rains. The other kind of unsung hero of this film is James Wong Howe. The cinematography is really extraordinary. They don't have any special effects like we have today to put us back in the 19th century. And yet with just a little bit perfect placement of, we only see that little sign to the orchard that his grandmother, to where Paris lives. Yeah. And yet it evokes every time you're like, oh, this is a 19th century. This is a booming little business in this town.
Yeah.
And and he does a great job of showing us the different, the progression through the eras, just the lighting and a hint of this or that, the angle of something, particularly after Drake has his accident, those very close up on his face angles that we get. Super into Ronald Reagan's face.
Yeah.
We've talked about James Wong Howe on this podcast many times. Old Man in the Sea, The Thin Man, and just a variety. The Sweet Smell of Success, Bell Book and Candle, even just master cinematography going on. So really great storytelling, and a really strong cast. I mean, there's not really a weak link in the cast, even though some of the choices you're like, well, I'm not so sure about this or that. And maybe it wasn't their first choice for a particular role, but I think it all just works and gels. I totally buy it.
I did too, actually. I really did. I felt that the chemistries were there, where they needed to be. The relational chemistries were good. Yeah, I agree.
So let's, I have a clip. Let's see, which clip do we have here? I wish I had, and we should talk about, the children are very good. We've got Scotty from the Little Rascals playing Paris. Young Paris, and he's so good.
Yes, the kids are really good.
Super good. All of the children are great. I love the boy that plays young Drake. You really get their personalities. They do a wonderful job. You totally believe that when you see them grown up, it 100% tracks that to
who they are.
So those kids. We also get glimpses really early on when Paris is a little boy of Dr. Gordon's sadism. Like, what's going on there? Like, why that just doesn't seem right, and I think they do a really good job of seeding those little foreshadowing moments into the early part of the film where we're just having the children, the Cassie's birthday party with her just peeking out of barely see her peeking out of the window, and the spooky house that they live in.
Yeah, it does have definitely the mysterious dark vibes.
We don't get that much of the grandmother, who's such an important character in the book, but it's a wonderful performance by Maria Ospinskaya. She's like indeterminately European. Sometimes we're speaking French and sometimes we're speaking German, which is what happens in the book.
Yes, and truly, that's what was part of their lives. Really, his grandmother was a German immigrant, and that was part of their outsiderness.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, the German immigrants were treated as less than. So that was actually a good choice,
And oh my, is there a lot of buggy riding? So much buggy riding there is in the book. The buggy riding in the book in this movie reminds me of so the buggy riding is of course a metaphor. Very much like the pickle dish in Ethan Frome. Like, they're not actually talking about a pickle dish. So yeah, there's a lot of buggy riding. Ronald Reagan's really riding his buggy a lot.
Yeah.
But we don't get the thing about the school. I just thought that I love the way the book is set up with that scene in the schoolroom. I think is just so brilliant. But I think, I'm not mad at it. I think Bob Cummings is a solid choice for Paris.
I think for the time it was made, I think the choices were good. I think it captured it for what they could do then. I really do. I just think now so much more could be done, but
definitely.
But they did what they could.
I want to play a little bit of, because even when this film comes out right after the book, and you talked about how we know later on, like in the 50s, that Freudian theory and psychiatry really kind of become central. There's a lot of movies about it. This is kind of early on to be talking about it in the book and in the movie.
Yes. Well, and I attribute that to, like I said, Henry and Catherine were basically, they were on the cutting edge of psychology in that they were holding these salons. They were inviting European psychologists to give talks and present papers at their home in South Carolina. So they were ahead of the curve.
Even earlier than this, right? Like quite a bit far.
Yeah, they were. That was like the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing this. So they were leading. And it was really funny is how when Ted writes to Henry, Henry's first response to Ted is, "I must warn you, I'm not a psychiatrist." Like who said you were? But
yeah,
but in his own mind, he had written Paris as a budding psychiatrist.
True. Yeah.
Around a lot of psychiatrists. He goes, "I must warn you, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I don't think you need one."
It made me wonder if he didn't get other letters from people like as though he were a psychiatrist, like asking for psychological advice of one kind or another.
No.
I want to play this clip of Claude Rains. So for a lot of people, this is kind of their first glimpse into like what even is psychiatry.
Down under the strain, the bewilderment, disappointment, and disillusionment. Gets lost, goes crazy, commits suicide. I don't know what's going to happen to this world in the next 100 years or so, but I can guarantee you life isn't going to get any simpler. Worry and doubt bring on a bellyache. Mankind's building up the biggest psychic bellyache in history.
For a lot of folks, that's their first kind of hearing of this point of view about the mind and how it drives human behavior. And then you can't help, as an audience member, I can imagine even in those days sitting in the audience, then that kind of colors the way that you're now watching the rest of the characters move through the rest of the story. You're starting to look at the other Dr. Gordon in a little bit different light. You're looking at all the other characters, and through now this, thanks to Dr. Tower, now we have this psychological lens on everything.
Yes. That's really interesting because why it would be controversial. I mean, I know when I was young, the topic of psychiatry was still almost taboo. You didn't tell somebody if you had a family member that was seeing a psychiatrist, right? So I think for this to be 1940 and promoting psychiatry, I think
really promoting it. Yeah, you're right.
Promoting it.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I have to say that in that context, it really was very forward and very controversial.
He says several times Paris, and I don't remember him saying this in the book, but in the film, he says more than once that he wants to be the best kind of doctor, a great doctor, like one of the greats of all time. And what kind of doctor does he choose to be?
A
doctor of the mind.
A doctor of the mind, psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever they were calling them. Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that they were aware that the mind is like that frontier. You can look at an arm, a leg, a heart. You can't look at the mind, and so I think that they were really seeing that the mind is that frontier of where vast discovery can happen and the necessity for it eventually. Yeah. And
he's very we get to see him practice his trade even, he's not in the asylum like he is in the book. In the book, he has a whole career at the asylum. And we get to see him in Europe a little bit more than we do in the film, but he gets called in a professional capacity to see Louise Gordon, the daughter of the sadistic Dr. Gordon.
That's an interesting story.
It's a really interesting story.
How the threads of Drake being in love with her and would marry her, but the righteousness of her family would forbid her to be with this wild man. And she, of course, is just she shrivels as a person when she can't have what she considered her love, and then to have her righteous father which he was doing, which is also I can't remember. Were there any other evidences in the film of the disfiguring?
Only the when they're children and he's operating on that little boy's father.
That's what I thought when the father's screaming out. Right. They didn't incorporate, of course, Bob Callicott, who was the artist poet that Jamie Wakefield was a good friend of.
Oh, I forgot about that story. That's right.
Also having an affair with Letty Sims, and the doctor decides to take care of her sins by her ear surgery turning into paralysis of her face. So I mean, it was just,
there's many cases in the book that we have many instances. He does mention in the film one. He says, he's like, oh, and there's so and so, and there's but the only time we see something is that moment early on with the little boy.
Yeah, with the little boy.
We have Charles Coburn playing Dr. Gordon, and he's I think it's wonderful. He's blustery and righteous, and how dare you question my motives? Don't you know who I am? Kind of thing. Who plays Louise? Oh, here we go. Nancy Coleman plays Louise. But to me, Judith Anderson is Mrs. Gordon.
Oh yes, epitome.
We've talked about her on this podcast several times because she's in Rebecca. She's also in Laura. But of course, most of us know her as Big Mama in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And and she's I just love her in this. She's so scary. She's really terrifying figure. She's her husband's reputation is more important to her than her child's well-being, let alone all the people that he's hurt. Right. Her own daughter, like, she knows the truth.
Yes.
And all she wants to do is keep her daughter quiet.
She'll send her to the sanitarium.
Yeah.
Before tarnishing her husband's good name. Where are we right now with that story in our time?
Right.
Where are we right now with that story? Oh, no. We'll send them. No.
Yeah. It's I love that. I like that we got most of that story of the Gordon family.
Yeah, I do too. Because it really, the threads of Drake and the love and the righteousness and the wildness. And I think that plays out well.
So we haven't gotten too much into what happens to Drake. So Drake, we mentioned he loses all his fortune. So everybody in his early life, everybody has a reason to hate somebody, right? So what they don't like about Drake is what they don't like about Drake is that he's rich. First of all, he's an orphan. He's rich because he's an orphan. He's gone through a really terrible tragedy when he's being raised by his aunt, who also dies. And but people kind of resent that. People don't think he's like humble enough, or he's too happy. He's too free and does a little too much buggy riding for their liking. And so, everybody very early on in the book, and I think they do a good job of this in the film too, that you get the sense that the whole town, from the time that Drake is a little boy, all kind of feel like he needs to be taken down a peg.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so what happens?
So
he loses all his money.
Yeah. And he then loses the woman he was going to ask to marry because of the righteousness. And then after he has taken up with the other, what would you call it, forbidden thing, is by taking up with a woman from the other side of the tracks.
Not of his class.
Not of his class.
Yep.
They don't like that either. And they're doing just fine. He and Randy are doing just fine. He's actually enjoying becoming part of their family life, which has like real care about it, real taking care of each other. So he's lost his fortune. So he he's a worker. So he starts to work on the railroad. And, during, I think, the stormy night, he's out there and this train car slips. Is that right? And I don't remember exactly how the train car slipped.
What we're told at first is that he was run over by a train. That there was an accident and like a bunch of pallets of tile, very heavy tile, fell down, and he was run over. We think first he's run over by the train, and they're like, oh no, actually these tiles fell on him and crushed him, and therefore they couldn't save his legs, and so he has Dr. Gordon, of course, comes and relieves him of his legs.
Yes, and fortunately, somebody who assisted was there, and of course, too afraid. You're not going to say anything about the town doctor who is in charge of everything, but saw that there was nothing really wrong with Drake's legs. He took that as an opportunity to have his righteous vengeance on someone that he thought was a sinner.
Mm-hmm. And who in a way had shamed his family by getting involved with his daughter.
And her love for him really, obviously, really upset him that she was seduced in a way to love him. So he finally got his revenge on Drake by cutting off his legs.
And interestingly, so you have this very free character who, yes, everybody's always talking about him, and he doesn't care. He's living his life. He's going out with Randy, and they're really becoming close. And then this thing happens, and we forgot to mention that when all of this goes down, Paris is not there. His best friend is in Europe.
Yes, studying to become a doctor.
And Drake has kept everything from him, did not tell him about losing all his money, did not tell him about having to go hat in hand looking for a job, and certainly did not tell him about this accident. And Randy is the one who was like, okay, this is ridiculous. We can't possibly we don't need to do this on our own, and we're not going to be doing this on our own. And she reaches out to Paris. And in the book, it's a very interesting and long, as it would be, a long process, little by little, this plan to get Drake into a place where he can continue to have a fulfilling life of some kind, and not, which they do. Not only that, he also makes a go at business, and he's on a really good track. When the book ends, it's not as tidy as in the movie.
Right.
but it's not bad. I mean, I how do you wrap up months and months and months of intense psychological work, doctor to patient, in the last, whatever it is, 4 minutes of the film? There's only so many things you can do.
Yeah, but because Drake's legs being cut off really was the climactic violence, really.
Yeah.
That his acceptance of it as like that, finding out the truth. But it did serve a lot of purposes. I love that. The fact that Paris had to come to terms with not sparing somebody the truth.
Yeah.
As a friend, and be the professional that says, this is what it is. And taking the chance of having him have his own reaction. And Paris, fortunately, has had enough to realize he has overcome and he's become somebody. So I have to say, we didn't talk also about Randy, as I think he's done a really good job of a proto woman, a pro woman character.
She's so smart.
Who is smart. She's capable. She is devoted to her husband, but not just in the devoted way of like taking care of him, but in the way of helping him to see himself again, get back on your own feet, with kindness and care. She's a really great character. I think she's kind of the heart.
Oh, definitely.
She's kind of the heart of it. Yeah.
And I thought they captured that well in the movie. And Sheridan is so great in this role. She's so good in this role.
Absolutely.
It might be my favorite performance in the movie. And they really captured how the Randy that's in the book, where, I mean, what Paris is asking her, I mean, she's not an educated person, right? And
Right.
she's from the wrong side of the tracks, but she's very smart. She runs that household with her father, her widowed father, and their brother. And what Paris is asking her to do is very difficult. He's asking her um to embark on a series of, psychological exercises, basically, with her husband, without him knowing, and depending on her to basically to be a professional psychiatrist,
Yeah.
where he can't be there. And that is not an easy thing to do. And yet she very carefully, she follows everything he says to the letter and gives him feedback. And so together, the two of them, long distance, are treating Drake. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, she's not, she could easily have said, "Oh my gosh, this is too hard," or "It's too hard on him. He's too upset. I don't want him to be upset." Or there were a lot of ways that she could have backed away from that, but she doesn't. She just goes, "It's the most important thing." And so no matter what it takes, no matter where she's got to run and find this or that, or say something, or play
Yeah.
this mind game with him, she does it. And we see Drake, like, in fits and starts, he makes his recovery. And yeah, so again, you finish the book and you finish the film, I think, going like, "Oh, psychiatry, huh? Oh, look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
It could
Yeah.
actually help some stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not so scary and shameful."
Not just as a woman, which is great that she's a salt of the earth person with heart and love. But I'll refer to Rachel Price, Professor Rachel Price again. She really points out how it's the marginalized that actually have the perspective on the society at large, and that is often the case. Marginalized people know how to read the bigger picture. They start to have more compassion because they know what it's like to be on the outside. And so she's also one of those. She's looked at as a lower marginalized person in her life, in their world. And yet she actually has the nobility. There it is. Noble character, and has nothing to do with money. And that's huge. And that's because all the ones that are respectable and noble are doing terrible things to people, either psychologically or corruptly stealing, whatever. And
they're miserable.
Oh yes, and right, and they're miserable in it. Yeah, that's. So I have to say, Randy really does represent a lot of somebody who is not your everyday, your upper class person. When it comes down to it, they're leading. They're leading the way in terms of how to be realistic, how to be in relationship with this.
Let's play one last clip of the end of the film. Like I said, they smush a lot of exposition in this last little part of the film.
Yes, I love it.
I remember, like, I went and checked. I was like, "How much of this movie is left?" Oh, okay, all right, we're gonna tie this up somehow. But so let's just watch this. Oh my goodness, where's the final scene? Here we go.
Don't go.
A new feed and news transmission is being tried in connection with the use of wireless telephone.
My kid. Stick your chin out, Drake. Why? You're going to get the worst wallop you ever had.
Yeah? Who's going to do it?
I am.
Start swinging.
It's something about you and Louise Gordon and her father.
Paris.
She was here today, Louise was. She wanted to tell you and I wouldn't let her.
Paris, you can't. You're sick.
I've just come from the Gordons. I've sent Louise out to tell anyone she pleases. But saying it to you, I've saved for myself.
I won't let you, Paris. Please.
I'm not
if
your
you have
friend
any
now.
heart.
You're not mine. I'm your doctor. You're my patient. It's as if I had taken you in the operating room and I had the scalpel in my hand, which may make you or destroy you.
What's this all about, kid?
My grandmother used to say, Some people grow up, and some people just grow older. I guess it's time we found out about us, you and me. Whether I'm a doctor, and whether you're a man. You know the kind of man I mean, Drake. There's a piece of poetry, Invictus. I don't think I remember all the words. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. I don't know if you can take it, Drake.
Give it to me.
Dr. Gordon cut off your legs. I don't know if it was necessary. He was that kind of butcher who thought he had a special ordination to punish transgressors. With you, he had a double incentive because of Louise, heaven knows what else. The caverns of the human mind are full of strange shadows, but none of that matters. The point is, he wanted to destroy you. Oh, not literally. He wanted to destroy the Drake McHugh you were. He wanted to see you turn into a lifelong cripple, mentally as well as physically. That's all there is, Drake. Now, if you turn your face to that wall.
That's a hot one, isn't it? Where did Gordon think I lived? In my legs? Did he think those things were Drake McHugh? Spout that poetry again, Paris. I never was any good at poetry.
Drake.
What was it you wanted, honey? To build a house? We'll move into it in broad daylight. And we'll invite the folks in, too. For Pete's sake, let's give a party. I feel swell.
So for those of you listening, at the very end where we had all the music, he's running into the arms of his new sweetheart, who lives in the house that he grew up in.
Yes.
It cracks me up. I mean, I literally laughed out loud when I saw this, that he rushes and he goes, I've got to tell you something. I don't know if you could take it, but I have to tell you. But first, a poem. So it's so melodramatic. Like they when nobody mentions this film without using the word melodrama or melodramatic. It is 100% that. But again, I'm not mad at it. I think it's really successful.
Yes, that last moment with the poem, that is the same thing that Henry Bellman and is in Paris. He's still comparing. Jamie Wakefield was the poet in his life, and Drake was like the man's man. And here he's saying, you're the kind of man, but the kind of man also includes poetry, and he's bringing those two parts together, even at the end, even though, to wrap it up, it seems it is melodramatic, but the fact that they wanted a poem to be a part of the story of conveying something to this man about something very serious. It says something on that level, that he's trying to integrate maleness to include things that we think are soft, right, or warm and fuzzy. While he's telling him something really hard, he's telling him there's poetic language to also deal with this,
So what does it mean for a 1940 audience to see that for the first time? That is what we're going to discuss on the next episode. Fortunately, we have wonderful written evidence to tell us what was the impact of this kind of storytelling, these sorts of themes at that point in our history. we'll get to see all of that through the eyes of one young man. And I'm very, very excited next time to talk about Ted Burr and what this film meant to him, and all of the work that's come out of that. Can you show the cover of the book? Yeah.
Well, I'm going to show you first. The cover of the book came from, this is the photo that when I went downstairs that night doing the film that Ted showed me, and Henry Bellman had said about this photo, "You look like you have a face that comes from the planet Uranus." That's where the title comes from. It's Henry Bellman's perception of this, he called dangerous looking boy. Yeah.
And can we see the picture of Henry Bellman when he's older?
So this is what Henry Bellman looked like when he was writing to Ted. He sent Ted this picture and telling him, you know, people say I sort of have a scolding look. He used it at times saying, my picture is there as a scolding presence. if you do anything out of line.
So we'll talk about the really extraordinary relationship, again, long distance. They never actually met in person, that took place between a very young man named Ted Burr and Henry Bellman, who was still riding high on the hit of King's Row, and was going to die not long afterwards. So it's in these, you know, he doesn't live very long after King's Row comes out. But in those last years of his life, he has a really significant relationship through correspondence with a young man in the heart of the United States. And we're going to talk about that next time. Can you tell folks, this is the second time I've forgotten whether, because we have to decide whether we like the book or the movie. Which do you prefer?
Oh, the book.
Yeah, me too. That was the easy one.
The book. I hope someday there'll be a visual document that brings out the book.
Yeah, same. So the themes are just so fascinating, and although it is a very long book, like I said, you'll get through it really quickly. It goes really fast because you just want to know what happens next. Tell folks in the meantime where they can find you online.
Sure. The main portal to all of my work regarding these figures, is in the name of JamieWakefield.com. And that's JAMIE Wakefield, in the name of JamieWakefield.com. That's a portal where you will see the book. You will see the link to the film Letters to Uranus, about the 76-year-old Ted Burr, who is the one that told me about who he was young and about the letters. So that's there. That docudrama can be found there. And the demo reel to the pilot for In the Name of Jamie Wakefield is there. And then the pilot is also, the link to the pilot is also there. So that's the main portal. What it will take you to is my YouTube channel, Ecclesia Arts, ECCLESIA Arts. But the portal will take you there.
Great. And we're going to talk about all of that next time, but we wanted to talk about this first because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. And and there's a lot. Yeah, we had to set up, obviously.
And I'm really glad to give King's Row, you know, it's in reprint again for a good reason. It's needed to be told again.
Yeah, I hope people are teaching it. I don't know if they are, but it seems like it would be a great book for college literature, even high school.
Well, the University of Nebraska Press, the editor of my book is the one that published this at the University of Nebraska. So, and I do know she said a few courses are being taught with it, but it needs to.
Great.
Yeah, it needs to come in.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us for part 1. We'll be back with part 2, where we get to talk about Ted Burr, and I'm very, very excited about that. And thanks for joining us here at Book versus Movie. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much for joining the conversation. The Book versus Movie podcast was started in 2014 by friends Margo P. and Margo D, who lived on opposite coasts and wanted an excuse to stay in touch and read more. We sadly lost our good friend and co-host Margo D in July of 2025. We celebrate her wit, friendship, and love of history as we continue on this digital road with you. Margo D's books, Filmed in Brooklyn and Fever, The Complete History of Saturday Night Fever, are available wherever fine books are sold. Follow Margo P on social media at She's Not Your Mama, and you can email us at bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Now, if you'll excuse me, my IBS is acting up. Thanks for being here.